morning. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to you at home. And, of course, welcome to our audience here. And, yes, you heard right at home. This is an audience of undecided voters. This is a first for question time. You don't know how you're going to vote in the coming general election. You're still a broad and fair reflection of the political views across the nation. Talk to a few of you before we came on air this evening. I just want to hear from some of you as to why you are undecided. So let's start with you in the front here. Let's get a microphone to this lady in the front here in the spotty dress. Yes, so you're undecided. Why is that?
I am struggling at the moment to hear anything that is original, inspirational, and most of all realistic with your plans and policies. Thinking about our families and our communities, and in particular the NHS, health inequalities, the environment, and education as well.
See,
so
literally,
I'd like to hear something realistic.
This is exactly what I was saying on stream yesterday about the fact that if Keir Starmer is going to lose voters, it's because he's literally offering nothing. Healthcare, the environment, education, these are all things in which, when it comes to Labour Party policy, outside of the environment, where their plans on things like green energy are pretty good, although being watered down, in terms of healthcare, all they're being told is we are going to have a workforce plan and also introduce more private sector provision. And on education, it's just the free breakfast clubs and things like that. And they're not even talking about like rack concrete.
No. They're also going to have enforced toothbrushing.
Oh, that's true. West Street's got enforced toothbrushing, even more tinkering around the edges. So if this voter is literally somebody who Keir Starmer would lose based upon his current lack of any policy whatsoever.
Man next to you, let's just go along this road for a minute. Yes.
I'm a believer in love for all, hatred for none. I would love to see any party advocate for genuine peace. Sadly, I don't see that in Rishi Sunak or, in fact, in Starmer either. And secondly...
Wow, wouldn't it be incredibly useful if there was the singular political party in England who called for a ceasefire very quickly within this conflict, who could theoretically be on the panel to be able to answer this question in the affirmative? Wouldn't it be really interesting if we had anybody from that particular party on this panel tonight, BBC, in which you literally have a spare slot right now?
Yeah, that would be good, but...
on immigration. The Rwanda policy seems to be apparently in shambles. Maybe the BBC need to do a drama on that.
It was actually ITV that did the drama. Kick and mate.
But again, I haven't heard anything constructive, compassionate and humane from Labour either.
Okay, the woman
True.
Thank you. So an immediate cultural and structural change, the workload between men and women, so it's much more equal. In the UK, men tend to do more paid work. Women do more unpaid work and caring responsibilities and paid work. And that operating model needs to evolve because it really has to be all hands on deck to reverse this stagnating economy.
Oh, and let's have
I think that's a very reasonable statement.
No, that's actually fine. Yeah, I'll let her off.
I just don't know why she's an undecided voter, though. Like I mean, unless you're trying to decide between anybody but the Conservative Party, it's like at what point did you think the Tories ever represented any amount of either gender diversity or gender inclusivity or female empowerment? I mean, even when they had a female prime minister, she got there because of after being undermined by her leadership rival, who's literally on the panel right now for not being motherly enough.
Another woman. So again, representation. Yeah, it's totally not a bastardization of the way in which representation should work.
So for decades, my grandparents, without fail, voted for Labour, and even now, so the points ahead according to YouGov, but there's no excitement anymore because...
Not for you?
No, because Labour has converged into the right. And, we can talk about education, we can talk about health, and we can talk about work. There's no representation left for people from working class backgrounds. And so before we talk about what we're looking for... Not
true. Lisa Nandy's right there, and she's awesome.
She's got a regional accent. That's the same as being working class, right?
It's basically, yes.
And with there's also Angela Rayner on the front bench as well. But she's right in saying, well, even if there's representation in terms of people from certain backgrounds, and of course Starmer's dad was a toolmaker after all. But is there any actually pro-working class policies anywhere?
Breaking news. He was what?
I know, right? Shock horror. It's absolute scoop of the year. right here, Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker.
Do we know what his mom did? Has that been revealed yet? I don't know.
I'm not sure, actually. He's never said.
Fair enough. You know what? He's a very private person. He doesn't like to reveal information about himself. And also, the fact that Angela Rayner is there is because she was elected. They'd have gotten rid of her in a heartbeat if they could get rid of her.
Yeah, true.
No, we don't know what kind of house he grew up in either. Sorry. So again, he's a very private man. We won't dox him. And his
and again, on top of this, she keeps saying, "Oh, where's the policy that supports the working class people?" I'm like, yeah, reasonable question. Wouldn't it be really useful if there was a party who was offering progressive fiscal and social policy and international policy that could answer her questions about what they're going to do that would be able to win over her vote from a Labour Party that's tacked to the right on this panel, which has a spare space with no representation for any party other than Labour or Conservative? Wouldn't that be a really interesting proposal for BBC?
Yeah, the Lib Dems are awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. That's a joke. Do not clip that.
From the potential future leadership, it's important to understand that as young people, I feel disillusioned, and the only really viable option we have is the right. And do we really want to vote for them when they're complicit in a gender?
True! Fucking based! You get them good.
I mean, I'd say someone buy them a drink, but I would guess they don't drink alcohol.
Buy them a nice donut from one of the posh donut shops.
Strong words, okay.
Strong words, okay.
Well, an applause from the audience of Undecided. Looking a little bit worse for wear, aren't we, Keith?
You can obviously respond to that, Andrea. Okay, well, look, that's just a few of you. As I say, you're all undecided. Let's take our first question from Callum Mackenzie.
Thank you, Fiona. Do the British people have an electoral choice anymore? And if so, what is it?
Right. Well, I guess that is the key thing we are here to decide tonight. Okay, Andrea, do people have a political choice? And if so, what is it?
They absolutely do, yes. I think under the Conservatives, I totally get that we have been in power for 14 years, and I understand that actually in Rishi Sunak, we do have a Prime Minister who is taking very long-term decisions. If you look at things he did during COVID lockdown, he provided that £450 billion of funding that kept people in.
Also did Eat Out to Help Out, which God knows how many people, which he was told at the time would kill loads of people. It's you know what would be a really bad idea if during a highly contagious, deadly pandemic, encouraging people to mingle. That would probably be a very bad thing to do, actually.
In enclosed spaces as well.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just cuff on all of the waiters. What could go wrong?
And it's not just a situation where you're opening and closing your mouth very, very frequently.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues involved here.
Work kept businesses afloat, so we were the fastest to recover our economy after COVID. We were also the fastest to vaccinate our entire population. And subsequent to that, he's made some very long-term decisions about new nuclear, about things like the smoke-free generation, which is a bill I'm proud to be taking through in government to try and ensure that future generations of children don't become smokers. The final point I'd raise is the one that's dearest to my heart, which is backing for family hubs, which is providing much more support for families with new babies to have education, but also friendship, support at that critical time of life, the very beginning, which is all about
that sounds
the next
a little
generation
bit
of children.
That sounds a little bit like Sure Start.
It basically is. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, like I was going to say, like maybe that would be a really good policy that loads of people would be able to get behind, that we would take in earnest from you. If your party and your governments hadn't continually closed all of those Sure Start centres that performed the exact same role, everybody loved and nobody disliked, and we all thought was a really good use of state funds. Now do you say, well, we got rid of all of those, things went to shit, and loads of families couldn't cope with the problems of the cost of living crisis and now continual compression of wages deliberately in terms of labour market policy. But we're going to fix everything by recreating that policy with a different name and then selling it to you like it's new.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be a lot more credible if you hadn't done as one of your first actions as a new government in 2010 to destroy the very policy you're now surreptitiously trying to bring back, but you've drawn a moustache on it, so it's a different person. You know, it's ridiculous.
The best possible start.
Lisa. Alan Mackenzie, do the people have an electoral choice anymore?
I mean, it won't surprise you that I've come here to tell an audience of undecided voters that you absolutely do. But what I'm not going to do is spend much time talking about the Tories. In fact, I'm not going to spend any time talking about the Tories' record because...
What? Because I I think she's lying. I think she will mention the Tories a lot because fine, whatever. But also, as the opposition, you're sort of supposed to do that as well. I think that's fine that you would say, here's our plan, sure, but also the Tories are shit. It's a weird flex considering it's dishonest because she will mention the Tories, and I think it would be bad politics to not do so anyway.
Because I think they're doing it to themselves, frankly, at the moment. And what I want to talk to you about is what difference a Labour government could make. We're under no illusions about the scale of the challenge that we will inherit if you trust us with your vote at the next general election. The lady in the audience who kicked us off talked about wanting to hear inspiration, but also realistic policies that can change people's lives. And so I make no apology for saying that we're not going to go to the country with a plan that costs you lots in unfunded spending commitments, because it's your money and people haven't got a lot of it at the moment. But what we have got is a plan.
No, there are some people with lots of it. And you could take some of that, lots of it, and share it around a bit.
All gone. No, explicitly ruled out by Rachel Reeves in that article that she wrote in the Telegraph. Those things aren't happening, which, again, there are plenty of money available to get taxed, but they don't want to actually tax them. It's almost like they donated to the party, and therefore that's why their position has changed. And again, she started off by saying there was these things that we could do. Yeah, you can do policy, just tell you what policies you will implement, right? That's what we want to hear. But by saying we could do these goals, that means nothing to me. That is literally nothing.
Exactly. The rich have bought and paid for this party, so why would that party go against them? You don't bite the hand that feeds, I guess.
And for the National Health Service to get waiting lists down. It is an absolute scandal that children are waiting more than a year for a hospital appointment. 7 million people on those waiting lists.
Thought you weren't going to talk about their record.
She literally done 2 sentences after saying she wasn't going to talk about the Tories. She's immediately talked about things the Tories have done.
Told you. And again, that's absolutely fine. They should talk about that. The government in charge, essentially an election is a referendum on whether the current sitting government are worth re-electing again, in essence. And they're not, obviously. So you should talk about that. But
children are going into A&E departments simply to have their teeth pulled because they can't get a dentist appointment. We've got a housing crisis in this country, 1 million people on social housing waiting lists, and a generational crisis in renting and home ownership. We've got a serious plan to invest in clean energy so that we have energy security again in this country, so that we cut people's bills and we create good jobs in every part of the country. And so I say to you that don't believe this message that things can't be different. They're tough, yes, but with relentlessness and energy and determination and courage, we can turn that situation around. Maybe not overnight, but I have felt in every part of this country over the last decade, as difficult as things have got for people, that ambition is right there in every community. Just imagine what this country could be with a government, a Labour government, that had that same level of ambition for Britain.
Okay, there's lots
but
of
the ambitions aren't policies. Ambitions are not fucking policies, Lisa. And again, all of it was just things are bad right now. She said, I won't mention the Tories, apart from immediately then mentioning them about things of the NHS. And then they just said, we have this ambition to make it better than that. And I'm like, this isn't a policy. This is nothing. This is meaningless. And in front of the person who's literally asking you to give you a reason to vote for them. And your reason to vote for them is, we're not them, we're better because we are the government that would give you change. And that means nothing. It's completely meaningless.
There's a very good reason that no one clapped. Inspirational speech there.
True.
Because it wasn't anything. It was just empty. It was just hot air. Completely without any substance whatsoever.
Magic beans. Literally magic beans. Literally, out in chat.
The critique that was made was that it was all hot air and no substance. And she went, hot air and no substance. And then everyone stayed silent.
Exactly.
Hi. So why doesn't Labour lift the child benefit cap to 2 children and immediately raise children?
Extremely good point. Why don't they do that, voter?
It is a really good point. They really should. It would take 250,000 kids out of poverty at very, very little cost. And that's included in the money that they're going to be raising from the very, very small number of tax changes that they say they're going to make outside of what they've already committed for that money. They could literally do it on day one.
Children out of poverty. When I saw that reaction of Keir Starmer and Labour to that call, that's what made me really think and say, I cannot vote for you. So that's such a basic, fun.
There are other parties. There's the Green
Please vote for the Green Party. Like the Green Party are going to do that and also fund the NHS properly and nationalise our water sector and build loads of council houses, loads of things the Labour Party are literally not going to do. And there are other options other than blue and red. Please vote for the Green Party. going back to my very first point from the start of question time, this is exactly the kind of voter that Keir Starmer would be able to make them put off voting Labour. This is somebody who said they would be absolutely down to vote Labour and then immediately was turned off by essentially, literally, the Kid Starver policy. Sir Kid Starver himself explicitly putting voters off voting Labour.
Well, I can't believe this week Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London, has literally just extended the free school meals in London for the next year, right? Now, this shouldn't even, honestly, feeding children shouldn't be a controversial topic. I can't believe it. Literally, we have to rely on Premier League footballers to stop children from starving. It's mental.
Fundamental way of raising these children out of poverty. Why don't you act on it?
You better answer that.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly on that to give the others time to talk.
There's not enough money.
Because we're not going to make any commitments ahead of the next general election that we don't know we can keep.
All of this is the kind of rhetoric that immediately becomes part of the national zeitgeist and becomes impossible to overturn once you tell people it's like a household budget, we have to be able to make money to spend money, all that kind of malarkey that they keep running into the ground in terms of the way in which people only think in terms of that rhetoric. It's why austerity became public consciousness, even though it was just completely nonsensical and fiscally profligate.
If only there were a way
policy.
that the government could literally could take loans for literally tens and tens of billions if they really wanted to, and that this is nothing at all like a household budget.
And on top of that specifically as well, is that the money that they are making from the non-dom tax states is going to the NHS workforce expansion plan. The money they're getting from private school fees is going towards the free breakfast clubs for schools, right? And that total actually overshoots the budget that they're spending on those things. And they have enough budget from those two tax rises alone to also pay for lifting the child benefit cap for a very, very small amount of investment from the state once they get into government. Yet, what's interesting as well is that I was reading from a Guardian article about their planned new fiscal plans moving forward. There's a tax that they are changing that they're not telling us about, and that's their alterations to the Conservative windfall tax plan by removing the loophole that allows some of the companies to dodge that if they add extra investment, even though it's surplus money they weren't intending on investing anyway. And that tax that they're planning to change the working of the windfall tax raises an extra £10 billion, which is more than double what they're getting from the other two tax changes that they are outwardly saying. And that's 10 billion. That's 5 times what it would cost to lift the two-child benefit cap. And that's things that they already committed to.
Well, that's literally a way in which it's not like a household budget, because with a household budget, you get paid a certain amount of income. The government decides what its income is going to be.
Exactly, yeah.
Because you can change taxes, you can raise them, you can lower them, you can put them in, put them out, shake it all about. Okay, you can do loads of different things. It's not at all like a household budget. Stop pretending that it is, you ghouls.
No, but we've seen what happens when you have prime ministers come forward with half-baked plans that they don't know how to fund. They crash the economy and leave working people paying the price for decades and decades.
Okay, but this isn't tax cuts for rich people. It's literally allowing poor people with more than 2 children to not starve.
And even then, even if you want the
I think that's worth investing. Actually,
yeah, even if you don't want to fiscally expand, even if you don't want to borrow money that you can't say how you're going to pay for, you could literally raise taxes. You could just have a tax on wealth, increase capital gains tax.
So we have committed ahead of the next election to setting out a child poverty plan. You'll know that we opposed the child benefit limit when it came in, and we would like to see it removed.
Hang a minute though. Whoa. Rewind 1 second though. You may have slightly opposed that one, but the Labour benches were explicitly whipped by interim leader Harriet Harman to abstain on George Osborne's welfare bill in 2015. Don't talk to me, Lisa Nandy, member of the chicken coup in 2016, explicitly from the leader who opposed what was happening there. Don't come to me and say you opposed this when it came in, when you were part of the group who were in ascendancy at the time in which they were trying to whip to abstain against the George Osborne welfare bill, which caused the same kind of damage as part of their broader kinds of policies that helped send 300,000 people to early graves.
Well, so if I could correct the panel member, it was not 450 billion, it was 800 billion that was spent during COVID. And I see no reason at all why we can't have some of that money back, because the average billionaire in this country is some 720 million pounds better off over COVID, whilst we are all much worse off. So is there any reason why we can't have progressive tax, which brings wealth back from those who have it back to those of us that don't, particularly as 1 in 15 of us are destitute.
True, based and true pills. What an absolute legend, guy. When we talk about the money that was given out by the pandemic, again, as Gary Stevenson puts it, that was literally £12,000 per adult in the UK in terms of money that was given out. If you are not £12,000 richer than you were at the start of the pandemic, somebody has your £12,000. So essentially, it's all gone to the rich. Like, where's our money? Not just from all of the COVID fraud, not just from Michelle Mone and her dodgy millions, right? Where's all of that money that went into the hands of the super rich whilst they had record profits during the pandemic?
We will look back on the COVID pandemic, obviously, as a human tragedy, but on a sort of fiscal level, as one of the greatest transferences of wealth in human history, from the poor to the rich.
If I might be as bold as to say, I think...
Oh, do be bold. We like that on question time. Come on.
The point that I might be speaking alone here is that, Andrew, you speak so boldly about the wonderful things that Conservative are doing, but I think a lot of us might be sitting here thinking what you're rejoicing at is actually what we think is a common obligation for government to do. There is no point telling us that we're going to fix the NHS, because the NHS is not a new initiative. What you're celebrating, actually, we expect you. It's your obligation as government.
I love it. It's such a good point.
But we've spoke about this on stream thousands of times, in that the Conservative Party are not interested in any sense of the word whatsoever in the actual act of governance. They don't care. That's not their role. Their role is to win the election and then prepare to then win the election again the next time round. And every single action they take is about what is going to be best for them to be able to win the election the next time round.
And Boris Johnson was the perfect exemplar of that, because he wanted to be Prime Minister, but he didn't want to do Prime Ministering.
No,
like
he wanted. Neither did David Cameron. David Cameron literally did it because it would look good on his life CV. It was his goal. It was an ambition to be PM. He had no ideology. That was all George Osborne's job to delegate all the policy for. David Cameron didn't care. He just wanted to be Prime Minister.
A challenge. And the stark reality is, like it or not, we have faced 2 once in 100 years crises in the last few years. A global pandemic, closely followed by a major war in Europe.
But the NHS was
once in 100 years. Do you know European history? This is nothing. We used to get one of these.
The Second World War happened in the last 100 years.
Yeah, within your parents' lifetime, love. Like, come on now, this is ridiculous.
And also on top of that, on top of that, all of the problems that we see now were all precipitated by Conservative governments leading up to 2020. Of course, they've been terrible since as well, but all of the problems that they are trying to deal with now are explicitly a result of ridiculous, terrible fiscal policy from George Osborne and Philip Hammond from 2010 to 2018. Your government is at fault for everything, even if we take out of the 2 life-changing events that have precipitated the last 3 years.
Yeah. Exactly. Also, the Ukraine war didn't have that much of an impact on us anyway. Like, I'm not saying it didn't have any impact, but it wasn't that big a deal.
I mean, the oil crisis is pretty much responsible for the entirety of our cost of living crisis.
Okay, but I mean, I suppose, yeah. No, I'll let that off. Yeah.
Suffering before, if we're going to talk about the NHS, suffering before either of those things happened.
So you say the NHS was suffering. I mean, it is. We had the financial crisis in 2010, and that led to.
Although, actually, well, I will make the slight adjustment that the government could have ameliorated all of those things as well. But the actual cause of the problem was the oil crisis, yes.
Major problems with our fiscal position. That was just about righting itself. And then we had the COVID lockdown. So these things, you're absolutely right, and it's a fair challenge. Government's duty.
The thing, I'm so frustrated, I'm so angry that every time. Like, they try and say that, well, actually, we'd run out of money in 2010 and we were trying to get our fiscal position better to increase the debt to GDP ratio every single year from 2010 to 2018. You never got the public finances under control, even by your own metrics, and your metrics suck because they're based upon a paper that was released in 2009 that was then debunked within the time period in which you're in government because they used the spreadsheets wrong. That was their only evidence for their necessity, quote unquote, of fiscal austerity. And even on top of that, they still took loads of new money with quantitative easing and put it into the financial markets while giving us austerity for everything else, ideologically to shrink the size of the state, whilst impoverishing millions and killing 300,000 people. And the justification that, complete bunkum, complete nonsense.
Thatcherism in general is enormously terrible for public finances. If you look at the national debt prior to Margaret Thatcher and then after Margaret Thatcher, should give you some indication as to entirely how that works, and it's gotten worse and worse every single time, virtually every single year since then, because even under Labour, which in theory wasn't supposed to be a Thatcherite economic system, it's still got worse and worse. Thatcherism has essentially destroyed the good financial basis of what made Britain an economic powerhouse of the world.
To make life.
I mean, the problems are severe. I don't think they're intractable.
But the question specifically is, will it make much difference who wins, given that fact?
Let's get ready for the most milk toast answer of the evening. Let's
Absolutely.
Go. Oh, you've never seen a spiceless answer like this before. Let's go.
It will be a constraint on whatever government, and I think actually both parties probably need to be more honest about the fact that the fiscal environment we're in means that we face some very, very difficult choices. One of those choices is, I mean, I just said the tax take's the highest it's been since the 1940s. We're still sort of mid-range as a country in terms of how much we pay in tax. And one of the things we as voters need to decide is if we want a functioning health service, if we want good education, if we want infrastructure in this country, should we pay more tax than we currently do? There was a very interesting point made by the gentleman at the back earlier about wealth. And I think he really is onto something here, because one of the scandals of our tax system is the vast majority of tax comes from income. Very little of tax revenue comes from wealth. And things like, if you think about the ridiculous situation...
I was wrong. This is a slightly better answer than I was expecting.
I mean, he's skewering the Labour Party for explicitly ruling out any increases in capital gains tax or a wealth tax, which I have advocated for multiple times on this channel.
Where our council tax is set on 1991 valuations. I mean, think back to what houses were worth then.
These are true as well. Very true.
Politicians are reluctant to think about, because we as voters tend to punish them if they threaten us with higher taxes. But I mean, it's not just the...
But you're not threatening the people with higher taxes. You're threatening the weird lizard people who run the country. Those people are going to have to pay higher taxes.
I mean, those are the people who matter because they donate to both political parties. But he's very, very, very correct to point out that our council tax system is ridiculous because poor people pay only slightly less than people who own muck mansions, because the council tax band system is utterly nonsensical in potentially every single possible meaning of that word that I could theoretically convey. And he's very right to attack that kind of stuff. And we do not have a particularly high tax burden. Overall, we're kind of middle of the pack, even at our highest tax burden for a very, very long time. What's interesting is this is essentially a direct result of neoliberalism. And our state ownership was much larger, and we had state-owned enterprises and state-owned industries that in some cases were draining of the government's finances, but that was for good reasons, for decommodification reasons. But other arms of our government were generating huge amounts of revenue for the state, which kept taxes low for everybody else, like British Petroleum, this big petrochemical industry thing that generated huge tracts of revenue for the government coffers, which we now don't own anymore, because all of that money that would have been going to the government coffers is now going into the pockets of the shareholders of BP, who getting off scot-free because our taxes on share dividends are literally half of our taxes on incomes, even though that is what money that you get for owning stuff rather than working. For literally being totally unproductive, you get half the tax rate than people who generate all of the wealth. Because let's be real, right? People keep saying when it comes to, Marxist economics, and I think it would be better rather than saying that labour generates all wealth, productivity generates all wealth. Unfortunately, it's people who actually work who generate that productivity, as well as people who innovate who create that productivity.
Indeed.
Having people disincentivized from being productive by taxing the productive people more than double what they get taxed if they're sitting there on share portfolios or by buying and selling stocks and shares or property, we make our country even more unproductive. That's why we have a productivity spiral at the moment where it's not growing. It's 15% behind Germany.
Political parties that have got difficult choices to make. I think we as voters have got difficult choices to make because, if we want the sort of country that I think we all want, it might just cost us a little bit more one way or the other. And I think finding ways to tax wealth more effectively is one of the potential solutions ahead.
Which is a point.
Good. He said a thing worthwhile. You know what? I'll take it back. He's not worthless. He's now worth a tiny amount.
Point made by a man at the back earlier on.
And applauded.
Yes, we heard from
one of the few things that's actually got a round of applause from people.
Yeah, Lisa Nandy says nothing, no applause whatsoever. This guy says people want a wealth tax, be a good idea to fix it. Instant applause.
Bear that in mind, people who run things. Just say.
Labour's not committing to doing anything about it, to changing that.
We are not going to go into an election saying that we'll raise the tax burden on working people. People are
Working people. I mean, technically, Keir Starmer's not in the room, but chalk it up nonetheless. Yeah, no one's asking you to raise taxes on working people. It's to work it on wealth, on rich bastards who
The thing
don't
is,
work.
right? The thing is that people who own companies, they think they're working people. They think that that's work that they're doing by owning the staff.
Paying out an enormous proportion of their income.
You're not saying you're going to lower it either. That's the point I'm making.
By other measures. Well, look, we want to do everything that we can to make life easier for people, but the best way to do that is to grow the economy. That's why on
Red
housing,
button.
where we're promising.
Grow the economy. Yeah, honestly, she's doing well on the bingo tonight. I don't know if her dad was a tool maker though, so there are going to be some issues with it. But yeah, you could probably still get a line.
To get 1.5. We're promising to get significant numbers of housing built.
Yeah, landlords think they're working people. Yeah,
they do. They literally do.
Yeah.
People, because I'm a working class landlord. You cannot be by definition.
On energy, where we're promising to have a long-term plan for investment so that we can turn Britain into a clean energy superpower. These are all things that we did last time we were in government, but it's even more important now than ever that we have a plan for growth in this country. That is the route out of this crisis, and that's why voting for Labour will make a difference, not just for you, but for the generation that comes afterwards.
It's not policy.
Very colourful rugby jumper there.
Mine was really about what I want to hear, and I want to hear two things really. More about the long term rather than the short term. This country seems to work to the next 4 years, the next 5 years, the next election, and I also want to hear about what the previous government has done, which is going to be continued, because Andrea said something which was joy to my heart after 25 years of working with children and families about looking at developing children and families, but it smacks of the Sure Start centres, which the Conservative government came in and closed.
Yeah, hey.
It feels to me purely because they were elected.
But she's not wrong. Like, she's literally not wrong. This is the Conservative Party realising, well, maybe the Blair administration did this thing for a reason.
Not because they were making a real difference to children, and now I hear, 15 years on, that's being restarted. We need more long-term. I want to hear more about long-term planning and keeping the good things going, as well as replacing the things that are not working so well.
Andrea?
Yeah, well, to tackle your point head on, I totally agree with you. I was a huge fan of Sure Starts and Tessa Jowell, who introduced them as a Labour minister 25 years ago. She's passed away, sadly, but we used to talk about this together. And what we
went a bit Alan Partridge there. You're dead, unfortunately. Tragic. Anyway, Sure Starts. Okay.
We both agreed is that Sure Starts were about buildings. It was a fantastic initiative. And in a lot of places, they did develop the services to support families.
Okay, so why are you a member of the Tory party who got rid of them?
But what the family hubs that I've championed for many years,
to be fair to her,
Kev, fully supports and has put.
At no point was the Prime Minister a mother. And therefore, they weren't in the position where they would support families. And if she was in charge, she would be the only mother to have done it. And therefore, she would be the one who would actually do that properly.
Put money into. It's like a 21st century version of Sure Starts. So a lot of the Sure Starts are still around. It's not true that they're all shut down. There's about 3,500 of them in England. And what they are, many of them are now converting to family hubs. The point about family hubs being that you will have your midwifery, your health visiting, your parent-infant relationship support, your mental health support, your breastfeeding support, your parenting education, your antenatal classes.
You've had all of that in
all of that in family hubs. Well, in some, but not in that many, Lisa. That's the sad truth.
Come on, Andrea.
So you got rid of them instead of making sure they all did that by giving them extra funding or whatever. We just got rid of them.
Got rid of them, and then we have to get back. Like, honestly, this is she again. It's one of these things where they know that they're wrong. They know they've been literally cornered by just how silly their position is in, and so they have to go. Well, actually, we can change it slightly. All these things, better things, plenty of better things. And I was like, nope, those things were all there already. This is just another rebranding and realizing that you've made just loads of people destitute because you just wanted to shrink the size of the state ideologically. That was the only goal that George Osborne had.
And also, not only that, but there will also be the hybrid and the virtual support, much more support for dads who feel they've been left out. So the idea is to be a one-stop shop, and really importantly, family hubs will go from the period straight after the conception of the baby, so you'll have all of that antenatal support, all the way up to when your child turns 19, or if they have disabilities, till 25.
Well,
so it's a real one-stop shop. It's
I'm
designed for
just
friendship.
so it's just broader, because I hope you feel you've had a bit of an answer to your question.
Yeah, you're just going to bring back Sure Start, the thing that you initially got rid of. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's literally Sure Start.
Yeah. Oh, mate, the Tories are such dickheads. They
I hate them.
They play Kaplunk with like national institutions, and then when things fall apart, they start putting them back in.
I just wonder where we'd have been now if the one in my town hadn't been shut.
You just kept it going all those years.
Austerity is bad.
You're just nodding your head at that.
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know where your town is, and I don't know how to answer that, except to say that.
Yes, I know how to answer that question by apologising. Apologise. Your government destroyed the very fabric of this country by cutting away all of the services that everybody was poor relied on, right? George Osborne took an absolute hacksaw to the social fabric of this country, not just after neoliberalism did half of the job already. He finished the job by gutting every single public institution that the people of this country relied on. Mostly poor people, but middle class and rich people also relied on institutions as well. Apologise. Your government did that. You've never apologised for it. George Osborne to this day still says that it was necessary to do this to get the fiscal nature of the country back together, and 300,000 people died for it. No apologies.
And what we have in this country is opportunity and a social safety net, which is there for everybody.
No, it's not. We have the lowest
huge
social safety net in Europe. We also don't have any opportunity because of the cuts to the social safety net. Now, again, this isn't a very kind of broader ideological point, but there's a reason why there's more innovation, there's more startups, there's more economic freedom in social democratic countries in the north of Europe, like the Scandinavian countries and the Nordic countries. Because if you want to take the risk, even from a liberal capitalist perspective, all of this is, even if you want to take a risk and start a business, you can't do that if any amount of failure would put you on the street. And because our social safety net has been absolutely torn apart by the Conservative governments of Osborne and onwards, you cannot take those risks anymore. You can't bother innovating. We are literally in the point at which, a future Einstein would never be found because they'd be too busy living in a cramped, damp flat in some awful area of the world, humping shit for Uber Eats, because they'll never have the ability to be able to get that off the ground, because education is hard to get because you jacked up the prices, and social mobility has been cut to the worst it's ever been in this country. For her to come here and say, there's loads of opportunity, when we are like one of the least socially mobile countries in Europe, it really does take the piss.
Huge amount of support for people who are struggling. But what we're really focused on as a government is, for example, apprenticeships for young people, higher level apprenticeships.
Okay, I think we're getting off taxation, but just very briefly, because I want to move on, take another question. Lawrence's question was, will it make much difference who wins the next election? Annan's saying the party's just got to be more honest about what they can afford. Will it make much difference? Can you say to Lawrence, what can you say to Lawrence to persuade him that voting Conservative, for example, will make much difference in the next election when it comes to how much money he's got in his pocket?
Well, what we're focused on is getting inflation down. That is,
Anyway,
at the end of the day, that is the one
Yeah.
single thing you can do that will put more money in people's pockets, is if prices aren't rising exponentially.
That's the one thing you can do. Really,
it's
that's
also
the
not
only
true.
thing you can do. Really.
She was also lying here, by the way, in that dropping inflation doesn't put money in people's pockets. It means that the money in people's pockets isn't losing value as quickly as it was before, or if inflation is at zero, it means they're having the same amount of money. If inflation is still happening, but people's wages aren't rising, they are still getting poorer in real terms, which is, of course, not what she said there. She said that by bringing inflation down, they put more money in your pockets. That is a lie. The one way of putting money in people's pockets is by increasing wages, is by actually having more money in their pockets whilst prices stay at least somewhat stable, i.e. wage rises are higher than inflation is. That is literally the only way of getting more money in people's pockets, unless you deflate the economy, which would be a terrible thing to happen. So, if you could fight for higher wages for people, I'll do that all the time by fighting for better trade union laws, by having a fairer system in which that we set the wages in this country. But the reason why I advocate for that is because your government explicitly implemented labour market policy to drive down wages, both in the public and private sectors, which is why everybody here is worse off.
Exactly. To simplify it, the best way to put money in people's pockets is to put money in people's pockets.
Exactly. At least faster at which than the rate at which the prices are rising.
Yeah, that's also a factor, certainly.
And you're earning each year more than you are last year, net, you will be better off. And then we're focused on growing the economy. And, that's the big difference between Conservative and Labour, is they have a much greater tolerance to borrowing. And what Conservatives are focused on is...
Okay,
you have vastly expanded the borrowing of government. What are you talking
exactly.
about?
Well, the debt to GDP ratio continually increased every single year from 2010 when the Conservatives took power until now. So they do the same amount of borrowing as Labour Party do. And on top of that, borrowing is fine. Yeah, it's not a problem. It's not a problem to borrow money as a state to be able to fund infrastructure projects.
It actually makes
new investment.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You would be silly not to invest, to borrow to invest during good times. Yeah, of course.
Exactly, especially when she's here saying, well, the reason is that we want to grow the economy, and Labour are the party of borrowing, and they say they want to grow the economy, but they want to borrow. That's literally how you grow the economy. It's basic Keynesianism, is to borrow money to stimulate growth during periods of recession, during economic downturns. That is how macroeconomics literally works until 1979 in this country.
With home ownership a pipe dream for many and rental prices up 30%.
I suggest that this question is going to make your head explode.
Oh, you bet it is.
Yep.
In the last 3 years, which party can I trust to meaningfully alleviate the housing crisis?
So, Mark, let's hear a little bit more from you then. So you don't know, do you have faith in no party at all? What would you like to see?
I guess where I'm coming from is I'm lucky to be from a generation where owning your own property was realistic. And I have two grown-up daughters have just recently graduated, they've entered the workplace, but already one who's moved to London. Most of the wages go on renting a substandard property, and I really find it hard to see for her future how she's going to be able to afford to save. Not to mention she's got student debt.
We've got Labour and Conservative here. What could either of them say to you that would win you a vote on this subject?
Well, I heard Lisa already mention about a certain amount of homes being built, but I think it needs to be homes that are affordable homes, for more social housing.
And make affordable actually mean something again.
Yeah, true. It needs to redefine what an affordable house is. So there's not just 80% of market value, because they could be like 50% of market value and it would still be really difficult to afford for some people.
Exactly.
Yeah, although at least you specifically pointed out about social housing. I mean, I would be very vociferous and it has to be council housing rather than housing association stuff, but either way, social housing is exactly where we want to be able to get to. The people demand commie blocks.
Yeah. Rohak makes a very good point. 3 simple words: stop investment ownership.
True. Stop right to buy.
A lot of really relatively straightforward things that could be done that would make a big difference, but because they're bought and paid for by rich bastards and only care about older people who want to see their price rise all the time.
We're explicitly in the position where we are forced to have this ridiculous housing bubble and these sky-high rents and sky-high house prices, because the only electoral demographic that matter are the ones that can A, never go into negative equity, and B, the ones who want to see the value of the asset appreciate, because that's what they're investing in all the time, right? Landlords want to see their investments appreciate, and mortgage holder owner occupiers can't go into negative equity if they want to remortgage to get a different property. And these are the only people that matter in electoral land. Renters don't matter and owners don't matter, because owners always vote Tory most of the time, and renters mostly vote Labour. So they don't matter in any kind of policy. All that matters is house prices and mortgage rates.
Because around Oxfordshire, there are so many new developments springing up, but the prices are just astronomical. So for first-time buyers, they're just
they're out of
realistic.
their league.
Absolutely.
Okay, Anand, which party can I trust to meaningfully alleviate the housing
Either of them.
You can't.
Labour have made a bold pledge to build 1.5 million new houses. The Tories
It's
have
not even
also
that
talked
bold.
about building houses.
No, it's really not.
The previous housing target was 300,000, which is 1.5 million over 5 years, on assuming a 5-year parliament. So it's not even that lofty a goal based upon existing housing targets that are currently set by the current government that they're also failing to meet because of people like Theresa Villiers.
Yeah. And also, given the fact that we haven't built seriously in this country for 25, 30 years now, at least, this is papering over the cracks at best.
Yeah, exactly. It is completely papering over the cracks. It's a very fine ointment.
Dare I say, sticking plaster politics.
Quite. And the worst part, of course, is that Anand Menon is literally only pointing to their mission to build up 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years, which of course is only a mission which might not come to fruition if their plans to just deregulate a little bit and see what happens, cross our fingers, rather than, I don't know, spending new money on new state-owned council houses using fiscal expansion to pay for it, because it's an investment that therefore was within the fiscal rules, which they could literally do. They have Homes England, they have a state-owned house builder that they could literally use to both finance and also develop these new council houses to increase our housing stock without having to worry about crossing their fingers and hoping the private sector builds. But of course, Rachel Reeves, in her infinite wisdom, has of course ruled this out. Brilliant, love it.
I think we just need to find a way of going around planning. I mean, the green belt has become an excuse for inaction, which has meant not just our kids struggle to get on the housing ladder, it means that people struggle to move to places where there are jobs. It means that affordable housing is a pipe dream.
And when you say going around planning, what that means in practice, in some cases, is ignoring local opposition.
Is ignoring local opposition,
so
yeah.
Possibly from people like you sitting in our
and I know,
NIMBYs,
I've lived through enough local elections in Oxford to know that there are objections to house building here, but actually, this is a national problem. Building houses is a pathway to growth.
Really important point to make here is that local opposition happens a lot, and that is a problem. And the NIMBYs are wrong, and I don't like NIMBYs. But there's another YIMBY problem that people have, in that they just go, well, we'll just deregulate the planning sector, like Anand Menon is saying here, and like Labour have been saying in their own national discourse on this. They just, we're going to deregulate the planning sector, ignoring local opposition. But that's going to be for private developments, and private developments are going to make houses that make them the most profit and the most money, which might not be the ones that serve the best social utility, which is what we've seen from our marketised housing already, the lack of social utility in the way we do our housing, because we pay loads of housing benefits to landlords because we don't have enough social housing. But instead of having the right-wing YIMBY position of just deregulate the planning sector and let the private sector have at it, what you do is the left YIMBY position, which is, well, maybe we don't have to let the private sector just be able to turn our country into Coruscant. We can have new council houses being built based upon need in local areas to ensure that there's always a stable supply of social housing, and use the power of the state to turn empty homes, because one of the biggest problems we have in our country with housing, it's not just there's lots of people and not enough house building. One of the biggest problems is empty rooms. Of course, they could be in empty houses, which of course is a big problem. We have more empty houses than we have homeless people. They can also be in short-term lets, things like Airbnb. All of that nonsense, which Scotland are taking action on right now. You look at plenty of countries in Europe, all of the inner cities have all been converted. Instead of residential homes, it's now all Airbnbs for short-term rentals, which are empty most of the time, except when they're being used for those short-term lets, for, you know, the budding entrepreneur property types to turn their housing investment into continual passive income rather than using it for its social utility, which is as a home. So there are plenty of things that we can do to build new council housing, to fix the issues that we've got with the kind of housing that gets used. And of course, if you just let private sector build whatever they want to build, all it'll be is just expensive luxury flats that they can either sell to rich Saudi businessmen for their investment portfolio, or can be used for expensive rentals for affluent professionals, rather than the real affordable social housing that we need at the moment. Actually, Bristol, in the Green Party in Bristol, their council, they've just passed a rule that they're going to be able to compulsory purchase a bunch of empty houses to be able to be used as social housing. And Sadiq Khan's done that too.
Building houses is a pathway to getting people in houses that they can own, or at least afford to rent. It is a good for the national economy, and I don't think local protest should be allowed to get in the way of that, quite frankly, at the moment. It is one of the very few. Keir Starmer spoke recently about pulling the growth lever. House building is one of the
Oh, new button just dropped. Let's go.
I mean, it's very funny that I've been mocking Keir Starmer for essentially living on top of a big red growth button, and I'm very glad that he's taken my verbiage and put a new spin on it, so that we now know that he's just talking nonsense. That is literally just a bunch of performative guff that he uses to hide the fact that he has no policies. You say, pull the lever. That's all we're going to do. Just get in and pull. I don't know why the Tories haven't done it. 14 years in power, they've had a lever to grow the economy, they've just not pulled it. That's a dereliction of duty.
What you need is a growth Rube Goldberg machine. What you need, you push a little domino, which then sets a ball rolling, which flips a thing, and it hits the other thing, and
like the old Honda advert.
The few ways to growth the government can do that is relatively cost-free.
And just explain how that works for those who are not as familiar with it.
Because if you have investment. If you have private sector investment in developing because the planning restrictions are removed, then actually that generates economic activity. It also generates economic activity because it means that people can move to where the jobs are. So it's an all-round good thing. But we have been stymied by this sort of local opposition to, yes, we want houses, but not here. And I think it's time that national government took on local opposition and said, actually, we need to start doing this now for the good of the country.
Lisa, as you mentioned before, this is something that Labour want to do. How are you going to get round the point of local opposition? Because it sounds all very well in theory. If people don't like it, it's tough. We're just going to build our houses anyway. But when it comes to the constituency CMP who's thinking about re-election at some point, and in the teeth of the opposition of local people, they're not going to want that to happen, are they?
Yeah, well, look, two things about that.
And neither are some of the voters.
Because Anand's right, that there is no solution to the housing crisis or to the growth crisis without getting more homes built.
She says, there's this electoral opposition to it. And with most of these kind of things, people get really angry up until the point at which it happens. And then it does happen, and then they usually forget about it. I know that's a bit of a trope, but I think that's broadly true. I mean, it happened with something like the legalization of homosexuality, which was done completely in opposition to public opinion. And yet, when it came round to the next election, nobody really cared.
Yeah, so make sure you get all of your houses built in the first part of the Parliament.
Exactly.
Lists. We've got a private rented sector that increasingly resembles the Wild West. We've got a generation shut out of home ownership, and that's before Liz Truss crashed the economy and sent mortgages through the roof. And we've also seen house building falling off a cliff, in part because of exactly the dynamic.
Everyone knows how bad it is, because everyone's living with it. But in terms of what I'm trying to win people's votes.
I'm trying to explain exactly why we've made that commitment to build 1.5 million homes.
How? What will you do about this issue of ignoring local opposition in particular?
It's not something that any other political party is promising to do, but the way in which that you get those homes built is partly about the stability and certainty that I was talking about earlier, about creating an environment where you don't have 17 housing ministers and several different planning changes.
And to be fair,
it's partly about reforming.
I mean, you could get rid of Rachel McLean out of being the housing minister, and that would help a great deal. But of course, Theresa Villiers and her blocking of housing targets, that's another problem. Lib Dems literally took housing targets out of their manifesto based upon the party democracy that happened at their last conference, which I find extra funny. But again, there is a party that's offering council houses, and it's the Green Party.
So the party political broadcast on behalf of the Green Party?
Yes, it is.
The planning system, because one of the big problems with the planning system at the moment is that people are only brought into the conversation not just about where homes get built, but about the sort of housing that gets built right at the end when the deal has already been done and there's very little to discuss. It's a yes or a no answer. So our proposal is you bring the community in at the outset to get to decide on those things, including significant new numbers of social housing and including ensuring that when you talk about affordable housing, it is actually genuinely affordable, which most affordable housing is not. My sense as someone who's been a constituency MP for the last 13 years is that people strongly support us getting Britain building. What they won't support is 500,000...
No, but that's the point, right? People support, in general, building new houses until you have to do it in their area.
That's hence why it's not in my backyard. They support it broadly, but not in my backyard.
In someone else's backyard, yes. That's fine.
Is it? But although it is good to hear her say that affordable houses have to be genuinely affordable. It would be very nice if she would expand upon that and tell us what they're going to do to change the current metric for affordability that is used in terms of how we do planning at the moment. But that might be too much detail for a Labour Party official, because they never give us that much detail.
£1 million houses in parts of the country where people live on very low incomes and their kids are being forced to move hundreds of miles away. It's time we brought people back into the conversation at the outset so that we can break down some of this nonsense that politicians haven't had the courage to take on and get this country building again.
Stuart.
All I'm really after is both the politicians to be a bit bolder, a bit braver, because all we're looking at is to get our vote for the next election, but really what we want is the next 10 years. So why aren't we talking about the high street? Why aren't we talking about using parents' houses as a vehicle to allow their children to buy houses?
What, selling their houses, you mean?
No, but actually using that as a guarantee.
Right, okay. Yeah. I mean, we're...
So then if they all of them are homeless?
I mean, just build more houses. Just build more houses and stop there being empty houses and deal with the problems of short-term rentals. Like, it's not difficult. It's really not difficult to do this stuff.
Also,
all of these like extra long mortgages, all of these different guarantors, all of these extra measures like Help to Buy, which is just throwing extra liquidity into an already inflated housing market. All of it's nonsense, right? We cannot deal with a continually constrained supply and continually overinflated demand. We need to have increased supply. We just can't do it in this incredibly unsustainable way by letting the private sector have every single thing that they ever wanted. We have to have state built council houses to ensure that the market is also being built in a fair manner.
It's fun to me to watch people twist themselves into pretzels to avoid doing the obvious things that would actually help. Just the weird policies. Oh yeah, let's make parents leverage their houses, which they've already built and paid for, to allow their children to have a house. What?
Let me just, if you won't mind, I'll go back to Andrew so you can answer the question that Mark asked. With home ownership a pipe dream for many, which party can I trust to meaningfully alleviate the housing crisis?
So, you know,
Why should we trust
it's been a huge challenge for all parties for many years, and we've talked about some of the problems with it. And actually, when the Conservatives first came into office, we managed to get the annual new build rate up to something like 400,000. I can't even remember the number.
Shall I give you the stats, because I've got them here actually. So since it's very helpful. Since 2010 to 2022, an average of 166,000 homes per year have been up. Sometimes a lot more, sometimes a lot less. That compares to two Conservative pledges. First of all, 200,000, and then 300,000 a year. The average is 166,000, so you're way short.
Yeah, and it is fundamentally a challenge for planning, and there has been a new planning guidance.
It's a challenge for government as well.
Well, indeed.
It wouldn't be a challenge for Homes England.
Government sets.
It wouldn't be a challenge if the state was building houses. The Homes England have the power to do what they want, essentially. And you could do that, but you've not done that because of people like Theresa Villiers, the aforementioned MP, who keeps tanking the housing target plans.
It's the planning, exactly. So it is a huge challenge for government. In fact, just now, new planning guidance has been set out, which does seek to bring communities much more into it, because as you've just aired, there is a challenge with people who don't want that housing in their backyard. But as a constituency MP in the Midlands, which is one of the fastest growing, we have thousands of new houses, and my concern isn't so much the number of new houses as whether they are fit for first-time buyers. And actually what I would like to see much more of is the shared equity schemes, and also the extensions to houses, which we've done quite a lot of work on, so that you can build a granny annex,
more papering
for example,
over the cracks,
or
literally
more sticking plaster politics, more papering over the edges.
Anything to avoid actually tackling the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Small extension to have your children live in with their first child or whatever. But actually a lot more flexible ways of building that enable shared equity and also social housing to be bought by those tenants within it. And those are some of the things that I think will be part of our future policy.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and I thought it just occurred to me really. It'd be interesting to go back to the people that we spoke to at the very beginning. You've had about an hour of this now. Are you in any way more decided than when you entered the room? So we came to you first in the spotty dress. Have you heard anything that's enticed you into how you might vote?
I've heard some fabulous stuff, but I'm going to tell.
Where was
Who?
that?
Where?
Yeah, when did that? Was she watching the same thing? Did she have a VR headset on at the time? What was going on?
Take it away and think about it. Thank you.
Okay. So, no, I think that's... Yes, Kyle. Oh, my goodness. Okay. What about you?
I'm afraid I'm not swayed either.
Okay, no, sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, although Lisa Nandy is way more believable than Keir Starmer.
Oh, Keith! Oh, the Keith shade.
Oh, see, she smiled thinking he was going to say then the Tory, but no.
No, I'm going to have a go at Keith, the absolute charismaless vacuum.
Oh, beautiful. What a switcheroo.
Absolutely. Oh, you love to see it. You love to see it because he's not believable. He is just, again, he's just a walking suit that's been primed by Labour together to be their right-wing leader. Debated.
Listen how much that Keith shade got as a response. That's the biggest clap of the night.
It is the biggest clap of the night. Nobody likes the man. He's so hated. His approval rating is like -30. He's the only because Rishi Sunak is also equally, actually, is more unlikable. Whereas Keir Starmer is boring and you can't ever bring yourself to like him because you just turn off whenever he opens his mouth. Rishi Sunak is just like an absolutely contemptible individual that you just, the more you hear him, the more you absolutely despise like every bone in his body. That's the only reason why Keir Starmer is higher in approval than Sunak is.
I want to see change. I'm not seeing that here tonight.
True.
So it feels like the status quo.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that people that either Andrea or Lisa could have said that would have.
This is everything. This is everything. This is literally everything about UK politics at the moment. Just everybody looking at our identical politicians with no plans, no nothing, no change, no broad in any way vision for how they want to see the country, giving platitudes and empty words and answers that don't really answer the questions because they've answered ones they wanted to answer, and the public looking at them and going, you're all the same. You're all the same. It's all nonsense. You're all careerists. You're all people who don't have any solutions and don't know what they're doing. I do not care anymore. This is UK politics. Low turnout, record low turnout the next election. I guarantee you.
Almost certainly, yeah, because there isn't an option. There isn't like what would make you want to go and vote for either of them.
I mean, the Green Party.
No, I meant either Labour or Tories. Like,
I mean,
people will do it just because they don't like the other lot, even though they're exactly
that's basically
the
it.
fucking
That's basically
same.
it. Yeah.
I think it's this opportunity to how do we make it much more equal for everyone to contribute to the economy, and it's connected to generative AI.
Whoa. How dare you? This outbreak of anti-Semitism on the channel.
True.
Wanting redistributive economics, and again, all of this growing the pie shit and growing the economy and all that stuff that we got from Rachel Reeves when I pulled her back on redistribution, when we had all of that stuff from Liz Truss, because they sound identical at this point, and it shows it's just not what the public want.
Absolutely.
Fantastic opportunity to level up every corner of this country. Not hearing about it.
All right.
And nobody.
Yes, can I
from
come
nobody.
back to you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So has nothing swayed you either? I mean, I'm not sure how optimistic I was, to be honest. I don't want to sound naive about this. I mean, you've had, months and months, years to think about this. I'm assuming, looking at you, you're good.
If I was a floating voter and I'd watch this, I'd be more.
Are you not a floating voter? Have you committed to a party yet? Or...
Yeah, exactly. I don't talk about them, but I actually am voting for the Green Party. I've never mentioned it. I've been keeping my cards close to my chest. But if I was a floating voter, I think I would answer that I was more turned off after all of this waffle and nonsense. I think it was interesting just to see how uninteresting that it was. Like, I know that sounds very ironic, but like I think it genuinely was important that we did all of this. We had an hour of people asking questions back and forth between panelists and hosts and people in the audience, and at the end of it, people who were there who were unsure of who to vote for came out even less enthused about politics than when they went in. I think that's super important that was what we ended up with. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.